Hey guys, DIY Maniac, John P here. Have you been driving around and when you're going over bumps, you're hearing a bit of rattling coming from the back of your car? Is it your shocks? Is it your springs? Possibly could be your sway bar end links. And that's what it is in the case of my 2013 9th generation Honda Civic. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the procedure to replacing those rear end sway bar end links. Follow along. So the first thing is get the car lifted up, get your rear tire off. Definitely support the vehicle with jack stands whenever working under the car. If we look over here, you could see your sway bar end link is right here. You're going to have 2 points of connection. The top part, which connects the end link to the sway bar itself, which is held on with a 17mm nut, and on the bottom to the lower control arm with a 14mm nut. Now, just like with ball joints, tie rod ends, these are going to want to spin when you try to loosen that nut. And for that reason, from the factory, the studded portion of the end link where the nut screws onto can receive a 3/16 inch Allen wrench into the end of it as such to hold it while you take an open end wrench and turn it. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. Piece of advice with that upper end link nut, especially on the passenger side, as you're trying to loosen it, the sway bar itself is going to want to flex on you. And what was happening to me was, as I was trying to loosen the nut, I would flex the sway bar until the point where my ratchet would hit the control arm and I couldn't turn anymore. Basically just not giving me enough room to turn the ratchet to break that nut free. So what I did is I preloaded the suspension with my floor jack under my ball joint to put some pressure on it, and that allowed me to break that nut free. So I'm going to go ahead now is continue removing that nut with the 3/16 Allen inserted into the spindle end with my 17mm open end wrench. Now guys, I'm always the school of thought of work smart, not hard. So instead of trying to reach in there with 2 hands, holding your Allen key while the wrench, just let the Allen key kind of lock itself in. If you have a T-handle or the style I have, you turn it enough, it'll eventually find somewhere to wedge into, in this case, the exhaust flange. And that allows me now to not have to hold the Allen key, but allows me to work one-handed and just removing that nut. And you could take it off like that. So the top nut is removed, as you can see here. I'm now going to go ahead and remove the lower nut, once again 14mm, using your 3/16 Allen to hold the spindle from turning. Leave the top spindle into the sway bar. No sense removing it now and having it flop around while you're trying to remove the lower one. Keep it in place. Once you remove the lower nut, then we can work the end link out of both the orifices. So both of the nuts are now removed. The lower one did give me a little bit of trouble, mainly because the exposed thread on the spindle portion had a lot of corrosion because it's so low on the car. So do yourself a favor, go over it with a wire brush, either on a die grinder or on your drill, clean up those threads, put a little penetrating oil, and it's going to go a lot easier. So both nuts are removed. So the car suspension is not loaded right now. Car is jacked up. The sway bar end link will just come loose as such, and it's out of the car. FedEx just showed up and we received our replacement parts. I got these off Rock Auto. They are Moog suspension component parts. I know there's that love-hate relationship with Moog, but that's the direction I went. The one thing I will say about Moog, even though there's a lot of bad stories, what I like about their components is they do have the grease zerts, so you can grease them as part of your yearly maintenance. I wish the OE Honda ones allowed you to do that. So in terms of part numbers, there is a difference between left and right. So if we look here, passenger side, right side, there's your part number. And driver side, left side, there is your part number. In reality, you can't mix them up because they can only go one way. It won't fit if you try to mix them up. So no fear there in that happening. The other difference with the Moog suspension component part is that instead of having the opening for an Allen key like the OE one did, it has a hex nut after the threaded portion to put a wrench. I actually prefer much more this style over having the Allen key. I wish the Honda ones had that as well. So we're going to set up the camera and we're going to show how these go in. So like I said, these could really only go in one way. So you could figure it out. You could put your lower threaded stud in to the receiver on the control arm, and then the upper stud goes through the stabilizer bar, and that's it in place. You're then going to put your two nuts and you're going to torque it down to 30 foot-pounds. Now, school of thought, do we torque it with the vehicle suspension under load or up on jack stands? I'll leave you guys to make your own decision. The way I do it is I do put the suspension under load. I jack up the lower control arm to get some tension on it, and then I torque my fasteners. But you guys definitely do as you see fit. Once you do that, you could come with your grease gun. I believe they are greased from the factory, but always good to give them a couple of little squirts of grease into the zerts. Put a dust cap on the grease zert if you have. Well guys, that's the removal and installation of rear sway bar end links on a 2013 9th gen Honda Civic. Thanks a lot for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below.